Hi wonderful weavers, today we're taking some recycled cotton made from old jeans and some recycled Sari Silk yarn, putting them together and making a beautiful table runner. Let's get started. Hi everyone, it's Steph and welcome to another video. The last one before we start our towel series next week, so I'm very excited. I'll be using my 60cm loom for this project. And here you can see I finally popped those dowels in and got rid of those awful knobs. I'll be using my 10 dent reed, my repurposed coat rack that I use as pegs, small scissors, my warping hook, and obviously clamps for my loom. I'll be using the boat shuttle with the recycled cotton today because it's a fine yarn, and I'll need to wind on some bobbins using. A quick check shows that this yarn works out to be around 22 wraps per inch or 22 WPI. So I decided to double this on a 10 dent reed, and this is the yarn, a beautiful deep navy, which I think will show the colors of this beautiful recycled Sari Silk that I purchased. So I did purchase this, I didn't spin this myself, but the colors are divine, so bright, so colorful. And today I'll be using an inlay technique. As always, I will pop my pegs on one end of my dining table, making sure I get it the right way around this time. The length of the warp will be 1.9 meters, which I think works out to about 76 inches. And I'll also clamp my 60cm loom or 24 inch to the other end of my dining table, and I can get started. Using my 10 dent reed, I'm going to switch it around to make sure that the smooth side is facing towards the pegs. And because I removed my center markers when I put the tung oil on and did the loom maintenance, I've had to redo that. So marking the center makes it a lot easier to center for a weaving width. So this weaving width will be 40 centimeters, which is about 15 3/4 inches. So at the center, I find the 20 centimeters, which is half, and then I can mark the start and the end of where I'm going to be starting and finishing warping. And I just do this to make things a little bit easier and simpler for myself. As this is one of those giant cones, I think it's a 1 kilo cone that just happened to be on special at Thread Collective, so I picked it up. I'm just going to pop it on the floor to do my warping. Also, I'm redoing my apron rod holders or the ties because I like to secure the apron rod to the heddle when warping, and that just helps with tension from start to finish, and it helps to keep everything nice and even. Now I am doubling this warp, which means I'll be warping through all of the slots and all of the holes, and this will make a nice firm fabric which will be perfect for a table runner. So warping was super easy and relatively quick. It's just the one color warping through all of the slots and all of the holes. One thing I really love about doubling the warp is that there's no threading, which makes things a lot easier and quicker. Note to self, don't use batwing sleeves when filming. Anyway, I already love the feel of this yarn. It feels super soft and it already has a little bit of texture to it, which feels really lovely already. I can't wait to see what it's like when it actually weaves up. I'm adding in some Sari Silk to the edges, so basically just one warp through the slot, one slot on either side. This will give it a bit of a border, and I'm adding it on top of the slot yarn that's already there, and that will help it stick out just a little bit because some of the colors are darker than others, so I'm thinking some might actually blend in rather than stick out. So I think this will be one way of putting a nice border on, and I'll do it at the start and the finish as well just to finish it off. So I'm doing the border 5 slots in on either side. So once the warping has finished, I quickly check it to make sure that I haven't missed any holes or slots, unclamp the loom from the table and wind on just a little bit. And how good is it not to have those knobs on when I've done the textile upgrade. I just used some thick brown paper made from old shopping bags as my warp separator, and because it's the length of my dining table, I like to just wind on direct towards the pegs, and that really helps with tension and winding it on nice and even on the back beam. I wound on about 4 bobbins with the recycled Eco Jeans yarn, and I'm getting used to winding it on evenly. Sometimes it wants to go back on itself like here, but I didn't take too long to get those bobbins wound up, ready for weaving. Now, because we have doubled and warped already through the slots and the holes, no threading is required, so we can move straight into knotting. So I just find 8 doubled threads and then pop a knot down the bottom of that little group, and I just try to make the knots for each little group roughly around the same place, because that makes it easier when we're spreading the warp and getting a nice straight line to start our weaving on. Now my table runner will have a very small fringe, but it's only going to be a tiny one, so I'm still going to lash on. So to lash on, I grab a group, divide in half, drop the scrap yarn through the top, around the bottom of the apron rod, and continue that across all of the groups. Once all of the groups are lashed on, I'll go through and give them all a really good tightening up until I feel like they're all fairly even with tension. And just to double check that, I will just strum the warp at the back of the heddle, and that's a really great way of picking up areas that may be slacker than others or areas that may be a little bit too tight. And do remember, when you lash on, the tension doesn't need to be super tight. You just need to make sure that the tension is even across the warp, and you can actually tighten everything up by winding on. Now we will spread the warp, and we do this to make sure that we don't have those little V's down at the bottom of our weaving where we've put everything in little groups to lash on. So the way I spread the warp is I do 3 picks without beating, and then beat those 3 picks down to a nice straight line next to where the knots are down the bottom. I then repeat and do another 3 picks without beating, so 3 picks on 3 different sheds, and then beat those second lot of 3 picks down to meet the first lot. And that's usually all I need to do to spread the warp. And once you've beaten them down, just quickly tighten up on your front beam, and that will make sure that the tension is perfect and you are ready to weave. Now I will be doing a hem stitch because I've got a little fringe. So I'm just pulling out around about 6 lengths of the width of the weaving from the shuttle. And it was at this stage that I realised that all of that yarn needs to go through that side opening. So once I realised that, I just poked it all through the side. Whilst I was poking it through, I just held the bobbin in place with my finger to make sure it didn't roll out any more yarn and didn't go anywhere. I then just throw that first pick, and then I wind up all of the excess just into a little yarn butterfly, and this just dangles on the side, and it just helps to keep it nice and neat and out of the way until I'm ready to do the hem stitching. This way also you don't have to start and weave in the start of your hem stitch because it's already a part of the weaving. Here I'm feeling very accomplished because I really felt like I'd gotten the knack of throwing the shuttle on a much smaller width of weaving. Anyway, I went ahead and wove about 1 inch, and then I'm going to put a couple of picks of the Sari Silk yarn in just for that edge to match the sides, and it also makes the border for where my inlay is going to be as part of the runner. I wove a little bit more, and then I went ahead and did the hem stitching before winding on. I love the look and feel of this Eco Jeans yarn. The fabric looks really solid and very good. I'm also, just in case I haven't mentioned it, doing a single weft because the weft will hold the weaving together while the inlay will just provide that pop of colour. The weaving sequence for inlay is quite simple. Pop your heddle in the up position and then work out where and how big you want to place your inlay. So I'm just going across 4 slot threads, and I've just wound up small sections of yarn into a yarn butterfly because it makes it a little bit easier to work with. Then I'm going to tuck the tail into the back. Once the weaving is wet finished, that should hold in place quite nicely. Then beat, then pop the heddle in the down position, throw your pick, and then beat as normal, and then pop your heddle into the up position, beat, then back into the up position for you to place your inlay. So it's literally just these 3 weaving sequences. So up, place your inlay, beat, heddle down, throw a pick, heddle up, throw a pick, beat, back into the up position, and then place your inlay, and so on. The design I kind of made up as I went along, and I went for a center stripe and then the outside edges being staggered. So it would look like arrows that point from the edge to the center. So to do this, I start in the center, and when I've done 5 inlays, I then added the outside inlays in. When those were at 5, I added 1 more into the center. And then the next one, and then each section is 14 rows or 14 rows of inlays deep. Like once I've done 14 inlays, I then end it for that particular section, and that way it will all look like the arrows are going towards the center. Once I'm at the center, I will reverse it so that the arrows go from the outside in as well. How pretty does this Sari Silk look? Just so pretty, and the colours are really popping against the navy so nicely. I'll just show you a few rounds just so that you can see what I'm doing in real time. But honestly, inlay could not be simpler. It is so easy to do, and just make sure that when you do place your inlays, you do a little bubble at the top, which gives room for the yarn to sit nicely and not shrink up. After I had woven the arrow inlays for about 30 inches, I changed tack because I wanted something in the middle that was different. So I popped a pickup stick in. To do this, pop your heddle in the down position because you only use slot threads in your pickup. And from the border edge to border edge, I picked up 2 slot threads and left 2 slot threads. So 2 up, 2 down from border edge to border edge. So weaving this way is a mix of techniques. So it's technically weft floats, however, they do sit on top of the plain weave. So it's a mix of weft floats and inlay technique. The reason I did this was to provide a section in the middle of the runner to put my vase with flowers on that I like to have on my dining table. And it's also a nice, stable, thick base that I can use the runner for, you know, putting something relatively hot on my table. To weave this technique, it's quite easy. You throw 1 pick with the heddle in the up position of the navy yarn, 1 pick with the heddle in the down position with your navy yarn, then pop your heddle in the neutral position and pop your pickup stick up on edge. Then throw a pick with your inlay yarn, in this case the Sari Silk. So again, quite simple. Just 2 plain picks and then 1 pick with your heddle in neutral and your pickup stick up. I will show you what this looks like in a close-up in a moment, but what it does is provides lots of weft floats, but the weft floats are anchored so they won't shift around when it's wet finished. But yeah, I will show you what this looks like here. So I started this center panel after the weaving was 30 inches. I will do 10 inches of this center panel weft floats and then another 30 inches of the arrows going in different directions. So in total, that would make the runner before wet finishing 30 plus 30 plus 10, so 70 inches, which gives me 6 inches for loom waist and wriggle room. So I'm cutting it fairly fine. However, I have got that Texsolve upgrade, which means I can weave almost up to the heddle if I need to. So here you can see the weft floats and how they're anchored by doing the 2 up, 2 down, and they're double anchored at the edges as well. And that really anchors it all down and stops those weft floats from moving all over the place. So here I am almost done. So I reverse the arrows. So when I'm doing the center bit, when that's at 5 inlays, I'm adding the ones next to it, then the outer, and then the final outer ones, and that reverses the arrow in how it's going to look at the end. So here I'm almost finished. I'm just doing the last few picks of that center panel. Then I'll weave a little bit more and then add that border like I did at the start. After I put that border in, I'm just doing my quick 2x2 hem stitch to finish everything off, and then I'll be able to cut from the loom. I've really enjoyed this project. It's been a little bit of a surprise on how it would look and turn out, and I'm just loving how the multicolored Sari Silk looks and pops against the navy. So really super pretty. Here you can see the arrows going down, and then the center panel, and just another little close-up of what that looks like, and then the other section where the arrows are going upwards. To wet finish, I put this in my washing machine on a delicate cycle on 20 degrees because I wasn't really sure how the silk would react. And then I'm ironing it on the reverse side just in case. But the silk is holding up just fine. And I think probably because it's a recycled silk, then it's not going to warp and distort as if it was 100% silk. To cut the fringe, I'm just lining up a quilting ruler on my hem stitch line, and that will give me just under an inch for a nice small fringe on both sides. And I'm just using a rotary cutter to make sure that it's nice and neat and all very much the same length, and it just makes it look a little bit nicer, especially for a runner. The last thing to do, of course, is to just trim off all of the tails. I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 centimetre, just in case that silk wants to wriggle out. Thank you, as always, for watching my video. I really appreciate you. If you felt that this video gave you some value, please click that like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.